If you had $1 for all the forgotten 80s movies, you could comfortably retire. The way films were viewed during that decade changed dramatically. Cable TV went into more homes, which meant more people had access to premium channels like HBO, which aired movies uncut and uninterrupted by commercials. Videocassette recorders became a phenomenon, providing an additional way to consume movies. Such innovations created a demand for more movies to fill the airtime and to stock the shelves of video stores. With so much product out there, natural selection was bound to kick in. Not every film from the era would be remembered. The weak would falter. Many 80s movies you forgot about are ones you probably watched repeatedly as a child. They were staples on cable and hot VHS rentals. Time has erased them from your memory banks because, quite frankly, they weren't very good. Even if you do remember them, recalling specifics is probably difficult. Sure, you remember watching them over and over as a kid, but the characters and plot points are hard to recall now. These films, doomed to pop culture oblivion, hark back to a time when new technologies created a strange kind of apathy. You watched whatever was on. You rented whatever was in. It was just cool to watch unedited movies at home. Let's reflect on a few of the most deservedly obscure. Bill Cosby starred in the spy spoof Leonard Part 6. Virtually everything about this production was misguided, from the blatant and distracting plugs for Coke to the confusing title. What rocket scientist thought it was wise to suggest it was the fifth sequel to a movie that doesn't exist? Leonard Part 6 is so bad that Cosby himself disowned the picture, famously going on Larry King's CNN show and telling people not to go see it. The public listened to the star's advice, and has been following it ever since. A great movie makes history come alive. A mediocre movie makes history seem dull. Revolution is the latter. On the surface, this 1985 film looked like a sure bet for the Oscars. Acting legend Al Pacino, Oscar-nominated Chariots of Fire director Hugh Hudson. Important historical subject matter. In spite of an impressive pedigree, Revolution pales in comparison to dozens of other historical dramas. Even reading a high school textbook is more enthralling. And let's not forget Pacino's Brooklyn accent, which seems hilariously out of place in 1776. Like our content? Make sure to follow us. Sandwiched in between Eddie Murphy's hits Trading Places and Beverly Hills Cop was his first dud. Audiences watched Best Defense expecting another Murphy laugh fest, only to discover that he has just a small supporting role as a tank commander. What they got instead was a Dudley Moore comedy about a military engineer working on a gyroscope for use in army tanks. Could any subject be less ripe for comedy than that? Even Murphy himself would probably tell people not to bother with this utterly forgettable movie, which, like Moore's Hero, falls flat. Perhaps noting the success of 1978's Superman, the movie and 1980's Superman 2, Walt Disney Pictures, decades away from complete ownership of Marvel, took a crack at creating their own costumed hero. Their 1981 disaster Condorman stars Michael Crawford as a comic book artist who decides to become his signature creation. With his fancy, and ridiculously clumsy, Condor suit, he helps a female KGB agent defect. Thanks to stiff performances, a preposterous-looking costume, and special effects so unconvincing that they make you cringe, Condorman guaranteed it would become quickly forgotten, despite airing virtually every 5 minutes on HBO in the early 80s. Superheroes are supposed to be cool, not laughable. When you see the character flying despite barely flapping his wings, you can't help but laugh. The Garbage Pail Kids movie is based on a popular series of stickers that spoofed the Cabbage Patch Kids. A movie based on stickers? Has there ever been a flimsier inspiration for a feature-length film? Hold my beer, says the Emoji Movie. The kids are designed to be gross and repugnant, which the film certainly follows up on. One has sores all over his face, one has a perpetually runny nose, and another repeatedly wets his pants. Hard to believe children were turned off by that, isn't it? Add in the creepy large-headed costumes, and you've got nightmare fuel for a month. Perhaps most perplexing of all is that the filmmakers hired Anthony Newley to star, because what child doesn't love that British singer and stage actor from the 1960s? It's bad enough that Mac and Me is a shameless ripoff of E.T. The Extraterrestrial. Like Steven Spielberg's classic, it's about a young boy who befriends a lost space alien looking to be reconnected with its family. What's worse, though, is that the movie is more or less a 90-minute commercial for Coca-Cola and McDonald's. Product placement is rampant. Everyone in the movie guzzles Coke. The teenage girl next door works at McDonald's. The alien is seen wearing a McKids t-shirt at one point. Then there's the mind-blowingly stupid scene in which a bunch of people break into an impromptu choreographed dance routine in the middle of a McDonald's. The only way this picture could stoop lower would be if a McDonald's employee showed up at the home of anyone watching it to ask if they want fries with that. Saturday Night Fever is one of the best films of the 1970s. Its sequel, Staying Alive, is one of the worst films of the 1980s. John Travolta is back as Tony Manero. He's moved off the disco floor and is trying to make it on the Broadway stage. That's a pure abandonment of the original, which was fundamentally about, a guy who finds meaning in his life at a disco. Where Fever had a soundtrack of classic Bee Gees tunes like, How Deep Is Your Love, Staying Alive is stuck with their less remembered songs, such as The Woman in You. Oddly, the movie was directed by Sylvester Stallone. Having an action star helm a film about dancing was ill-advised, but at least it gave us one of the all-time most bizarre directorial cameos, as Travolta inexplicably bumps into Stallone on a New York City street. Move over, Alfred Hitchcock. Superman IV. The quest for peace is what you get when filmmakers have big ideas and a tiny budget. Christopher Reeve returned for this fourth installment, which finds the Man of Steel fighting for disarmament, even addressing the United Nations at one point. He also fights a villain known as Nuclear Man. The intention was obviously to play on Cold War fears that were still prevalent in 1987. Producers Menahem Golan and Yoram Globus famously slashed the budget, forcing director Sidney J. Furie to cut corners. That led to a look that could charitably be described as cheap. Slashing 45 minutes from his cut caused the story to be incoherent. Given how many good Superman movies there are, nobody ever has any reason to revisit this bargain basement production. Paleontologist Susan Matthews Loomis, Sean Young, and her husband George, William Catt, delve into the Central African jungle to discover a living brontosaurus in this mid-80s stinker. The uninspired adventure plot is unhelped by visual effects that not only are a far cry from Jurassic Park, released 8 years later, but don't look great next to 1933's King Kong, either. Alan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold answers the question, what if you tried to make an Indiana Jones movie on a minuscule budget? Long story short, you'd end up with a lame movie. This action-adventure, based on the 19th-century adventure tales written by H. Rider Haggard, is best remembered, to the extent that it's remembered at all, for giving Sharon Stone an early pre-Basic Instinct role. There's an oft-repeated Hollywood rumor that Stone was so disliked by the crew that they relieved themselves in the tub right before she did a bathing scene. You may have heard that before. Can you tell us anything else about the movie? Nope, didn't think so. Long before Melissa Benoist rose to fame playing the title character on TV's Supergirl, Helen Slater played the heroine on the big screen. After the success of the first two Christopher Reeve Superman pictures, a related movie focusing on the Man of Steel's cousin seemed like a no-brainer. Savage reviews frightened audiences away, leading to an embarrassing $14 million gross, less than half its budget. Was the world just not ready for a female-led comic book movie in 1984? Was Supergirl secretly ahead of its time? No, it's just a dopey flick with cheesy effects and a disjointed story. No sane fan of the character would choose to watch this outdated relic over the TV show. Remo Williams. The adventure begins stars Fred Ward as a New York City cop who is recruited to become an assassin for a covert government agency. Trained by martial arts master Chi-Yun, portrayed in Lamentable Yellowface by Oscar-winning actor Joel Grey, Remo embarks on a mission to foil a nefarious arms manufacturer with ties to the United States military. As the subtitle suggests, Remo Williams was intended to kick off a major action franchise, something that could rival the James Bond series. It even had its own theme song called Remo's Theme, What If, performed by Tommy Shaw of Styx. Audiences didn't want a new Bond, though, and the movie fizzled with just $14 million at the North American box office. All sequel plans were immediately scrapped. Not even endless cable airings could rescue Remo from the ash heap of 80s cinema history. After North American audiences flipped for the blockbuster Australian comedy Crocodile Dundee, another comedy sensation from down under hit our shores, anticipating the same kind of success. Instead, Young Einstein crashed and burned. Why didn't it make much of an impact here? Maybe people were turned off by its oddly named star, Yahoo Serious, and his crazy hair. Maybe it was that they didn't want a comedic, and absurdly fictionalized, take on Albert Einstein that finds him growing up in Australia and creating rock and roll. Or maybe it was because, like Vegemite, it's one of those Aussie creations whose appeal just will not be exported. Howard the Duck was the very first Marvel movie to be released theatrically. Fortunately, and perhaps miraculously, it wasn't the last. It's hard to say what's most off-putting about this bizarre film. Is it the endless bird-related puns? The weird costume actor Ed Gale is forced to wear? The creepy suggestion that Lea Thompson is falling in love with a duck? Actually, it's all of the above. Howard the Duck may have been aimed at kids, but even they realize there's something fundamentally disturbing about the movie's content. The Toy is a movie that makes you ask, exactly how prejudiced were people in 1982? In this politically incorrect comedy, Jackie Gleason plays a millionaire who hires an African-American man, Richard Pryor, to be his bratty young son's plaything. Not his playmate, his plaything. From there, the audience is supposed to laugh as the kid torments Pryor in various ways, including firing at his face with a rubber dart blaster and dumping oatmeal on his head. Why anyone thought it was okay to make a family film in which children are asked to giggle at white people making a black man's life miserable is one of the great cinematic mysteries of all time. Masters of the Universe toys were huge in the 80s, as was the after-school animated TV series. So what went wrong with the movie? He-Man and Skeletor did battle on the big screen, but the technology of the era wasn't good enough to recreate the epic atmosphere that fans were expecting. The special effects and makeup work are somewhat less than convincing. Whatever you imagined when playing with the action figures as a kid is doubtlessly way more exciting than anything that happens here, even if your made-up adventures didn't feature Dolph Lundgren, Frank Langella, and Courtney Cox. Admit it, you'd forgotten all about Little Monsters before you saw the title on this list, didn't you? That's alright, it would be hard not to forget this goofy Fred Savage, Howie Mandel comedy about a kid who befriends the monster living under his bed. It was made for a company called Vestron that went bankrupt, so United Artists picked it up. Perhaps not knowing what to do with another distributor's leftovers, UA dumped Little Monsters into fewer than 200 theaters, where, according to Box Office Mojo, it grossed a pathetic $793,775. Between that and the movie's shockingly kid-unfriendly content, it's easy to understand why the movie failed to leave much of a cultural footprint. Like our content? Make sure to follow us.